A little bit about me is my name is Nessa Diosdado, and I go by Nessa. That's a nickname that, classmates gave to me, and I just stuck with it, and I use it on my social media. I am based in Texas. I've been a creator for half a decade now, since the pandemic started, really, and little did I know this journey would take me farther than I could imagine, but really, I think that, if anything, I kind of saw it coming. When you're passionate about something, you talk about the things that you really, love. I think people start to notice, and I think the right people have noticed.
That's the reason why we invited you, Nessa, and we are incredibly honored that you are actually that we are the first podcast that you do. And I'm surprised because you have such an incredibly powerful voice. So it is even more an honor that we're the first ones because, by the way, I have a feeling that you're going to do many, 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 many of them. So we are really, really proud. We're really excited. You are very humble, though, because you didn't mention that you have more than 1 million followers in total social media. You're part of this young generation of 200%ers, we call them, right? So you are 100% American, but at the same time, you're also 100% Latina, and that's super important. And in your case, Mexicana, which is very, very, very important. And they blend, right? You don't have to choose. I also have to say that for those of you that don't know, Nessa ran for office already. So she not only has a degree, 2 beautiful children, but she also ran for office. So you're amazing. You've done many things that, some of us in our lifetime will never do. But so congratulations.
Thank you so much. I grew up actually, going back and forth from the border. My mom, she's from Matamoros, Tamaulipas. And my dad, he is not from the border. He's more like deeper into Mexico. He's from San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato.
Oh, beautiful.
And so, for sure, I do feel like a 200%er growing up. Sometimes I had my moments where I'm like, I don't feel enough like when it comes to being American, but I also don't feel enough when it comes to being Mexican. But then, I switched that mindset and told myself, like, you can't be thinking like that. If anything, you are enough. You are 100%, Mexican. You are 100% American. And I just love that 200%er, term. I first heard it actually with Becky G. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that Mexican American artist, but she made like a really powerful an impactful speech once that has been shared many times on TikTok about what it means to be a 200%er. And honestly, I feel like her speech resonated with me, and I felt that. I really did. I think it's really unique to be a 200%er and what it means, it's a unique perspective for sure that others can't necessarily relate to unless you are a 200%er. And I feel like, honestly, it's an honor. If I was to be able to be born again, I'd choose again and again to be a 200%er of anything. But yes.
Oh my God, I love that.
Exactly. I think that it's something beautiful for sure.
And you personify it perfectly. This podcast was created for people like you, right? People that are using their voices exactly to create the transformation they want to see. People that are really proud of who they are, and they're not apologetic. They're actually, they consider their uniquenesses and their gifts as, something they should be, exposing and empowering others with. And that's what you do, Nessa. And so we're really, really, really honored to have you here. And you are a vocal advocate for progressive change, and you've always been. Every time, I followed you from the beginning, and you've always been that, right? Tell us about some of your affiliations. I know that you have been, you are affiliated with Gen Zers for Change or with Las Patronas. Tell me, how did that come, to you, or when did you decide to defend others, to use your power to empower others?
So I was born and raised in a small rural town here in Northeast Texas to 2 Mexican immigrant parents. I'm the granddaughter of Mexican immigrant parents. So if anything, I like to say that this life chose me. I didn't choose, to be born into this life. It chose me. And a lot of times, I know it sounds crazy to say, but I am grateful that I was born into this mixed status family of immigrants, because although it's been hard, growing up, it's given me empathy that I think others would not have had they not, gone through this. I probably wouldn't have understood as to why, some people don't have a status in this country. Growing up, I found out that my dad, was undocumented, and I found out, early on, I was told, don't tell anyone this because we could get into serious trouble. You could lose your dad. So I would never speak about it. It was like our family's biggest secret, and it hurt, like at night I would stay up at times thinking like, wow, like it really is awful that my dad, he can't, go visit family. Like when his mom got sick and she ended passing away, he wasn't able to go be there by her side. He also can't, travel the world, even if he saved all the money that he, makes, even after all these years of working hard, he has to live in fear in the shadows. And while his children, all American born, all of us are U.S. citizens, even his wife is now a U.S. citizen, we get to live our lives, normally we get to live in the light, you could say, while he just, stays back. And that was hard for sure growing up. It made me it didn't let me, sit still. It made me like always question, like, why is this, going on? And, it sparked, like a fire in me. And unfortunately, we started seeing like an anti-immigrant rhetoric get stronger and evolve throughout the years. I remember 2015, former or current President Trump, he announced that he was running for president. And I remember vividly, it was 2015, June 2015, he said, when Mexico sends their people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs. They're, bringing crime. They're, rapists and criminals. And that's something that really, stuck out to me. I was shocked that someone could say that, especially while announcing that they're going to run for president to represent us all. I couldn't believe that someone would say such a thing about Mexican immigrants or Mexico in general, knowing that for me, like the best is my parents. And I think that when Mexico sends their people, they're sending their best, So all of that, it just made me want to do something, but I was 15, so I couldn't do so much. So a few months later, when I turned 16, I began volunteering at the polls. I worked as an election clerk, a student election clerk, alongside other women who maybe they didn't lie on the same side of the political spectrum as me, but we believed in democracy. So we were here helping people cast their votes, and, I began volunteering for other things as well, like local campaigns. And then I told myself, like I want to take this even further. So when I go to college, I want to, major in political science. And that's exactly what I did. But I will say, my first year of college, I found out that I was going to be a mom. I was in my dorm room and I knew I did not want that to stop me at all. And I did not let it. When my daughter was a year old, I graduated from college and with my bachelor's degree in political science. And I also ran for city council. And at the same time, the pandemic started and I had some free time here and there. I was balancing it all, trying to juggle it. And I started making videos, setting up my tripod, and that, passion in me of advocating for, immigrants helped me grow a platform. And then that passion of wanting to educate others about the Latino community or music, history, and pop culture, it, helped me grow a big platform and gain the trust of a community. And I really think that's how it all started.
Wow. What a story. Nessa, do you realize that? I mean, like you've done this in 25 years, right?
Yes, 25 years now.
25 years. It's like, again, as I said at the beginning, I mean, you've done things in 25 years that people don't do in 80. It's incredible. And it's so inspirational. I'm so excited for people to listen to this because I am getting inspired. Imagine all the people your age. Imagine all the young people, all those all those other 200 percenters. This is why this is so important what we're doing today here. That's why leaders should be on the mic. And I am so excited because not only have you achieved all that, but you keep growing at an incredibly accelerated pace, Nessa, because I know that in the last 4 months, you've been invited to Washington to talk to all kinds of people, to talk to business leaders. You've been invited to talk to the commissioner of the FCC, to all this to the DNC. Recently, you were invited by the DNC to talk to all these officials, to talk to all these other influencers to create this powerful wave of information that is real, that is good, that is progressive. And so tell us about that, because that jump from you running for office in a tiny little pueblito, right? And then, being the mom of your beautiful kids and making a home and a family. Now, suddenly you're jumping in the last 4 months into the, national forum. Tell us about that. That's so excited.
Honestly, yes, it's been an amazing experience these past few months and years, just being able to be given opportunities that I probably wouldn't have had it not been for having the guts to post on social media. It's been amazing. If anything, it feels surreal. So recently, last month, I know we barely, entered June, but in May, I had the opportunity to meet with former President Barack Obama. And that itself was just, it made my whole, year, if anything, my life at this point, because not many people get to say that they got chosen with five other creators to talk to him
Right.
about, a multitude of different things. And
Yeah.
that in itself, I'm sure that if you would have told, my mom or my dad when they first got here to the United States and they met like on a dairy farm here in my county, that their daughter one day would be meeting the president of the United States, they would be like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, are you serious? Like, I don't believe you, but you know, honestly, like anything is possible if you really set your mind to it and if you really have that passion. If anything, I can see me not being the last of the Latino creators meeting Obama, and I genuinely hope it's not the last. I hope there's more Latino creators who do get these experiences, more first gen creators, more young mom creators who are in politics or who want to get involved.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? With that, with the power that this gives you, right? When you're invited, because it's not that you bumped into Obama and he said hi. I mean, you were invited by the DNC to go to Washington to meet with him. That means that not only they want to, not only they want to give you an opportunity, but people don't do things for free, but that means that President Obama wanted to meet with you and he wanted to hear the voices of you and the group that met with him. So do you realize that you have this value that people are investing on, right? We invited you to speak with us to the, Protecting American Workforce tour because we knew that it was important that they met you because you can create the change. You are the boss of those representatives, right? And so that let's make sure that they hear our voice. And your voice has become that important. I'm going to introduce something a little controversial, especially because I know you met with a lot of other people, very important. But in the case specifically of Obama, so how did you feel when you also met him in terms of he was a big deporter, right? Like during his administration, there were, the big deportation movement started. He invested money in it. And that's one of the reasons why people have a lot of reservations with Obama, specifically in communities that, that suffered that deportation. How do you think you should use your voice? How is that powerful voice? Maybe not on the first meeting. It was not appropriate. But eventually, how can you go to those people that do that and say, hey, I admire you for a number of reasons. I'm really proud that you are the first in a lot of different ways. But I want to understand, right, how some of your controversial decisions came to be, right? Because I'm a voice and I want to help you and I want to, spread good word, but I also have to have explanations for the mistakes.
Yes, for sure. So I do know, having had met, former President Obama as an immigration advocate, even as the daughter of an immigrant, it was pretty controversial, given the fact that under his administration that there was a record amount of deportations that we have never seen in our history. And he still holds that, deporter in chief name. But I will say I acknowledge that for sure. And I think it's important, eventually, if you do see yourself still connecting with these individuals, to bring that up and ask, how was the approach under your administration with deportations different with what we are seeing today? I, have seen himself and his wife, call out what they're seeing today wrong. And I have seen people as well call out and say what happened under their administration is wrong. And I think what they are saying, everything, is valid for sure. But I also like to look at the positive things that also came out of that administration and how I would, much rather be under an administration like, that is like his than what we are seeing today, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
For example, under the Obama administration, we were given something very positive for the immigrant community, DACA, and he helped implement it. And although, DACA today is dying, unfortunately, a lot of DACA recipients, they haven't been receiving good news about DACA of anything. In Texas, they're eventually going to lose work authorization, but they will be keeping, the deportation protection part. And while the other states, they'll keep both work authorization and the deportation protection, I do, acknowledge and I'm grateful that that's something that his administration gave. And it's been the biggest thing that has happened concerning immigration, unfortunately, since, the 80s when we last had immigration reform.
That's true. That's so true. And Nessa, do you know why it makes complete no sense? I mean, in terms of why the way people, even DACAs, are losing privileges, and the president, currently is not trying to support them in any way. It makes absolute no sense because we Latinos, and specifically immigrants, are the ones that are providing the workforce in this country. According to the Department of Labor, which is, as you know, a number from the government, 78% of all the new workforce in this country in the next 10 years will come from the Latino community. So when you know that, the economy is built on production, on productivity and on production, and you need workforce to produce. Today, we don't have enough workforce as it is. So imagine deporting and stopping immigration. It just doesn't make sense economically. So the only reason that one can think of when it comes to why are people being deported and why are immigrants not welcome has to be there's some kind of stereotype or preconceived idea or misconception of who immigrants are, right? One of the things that we do, one of the things that we do at the Latino Donor Collaborative is create the data so that people see the reality of who immigrants are. And of course, I'm not saying that, amongst all the immigrants, there are no criminals, but not the 99% of them who are actually very decent people that come here to work and to benefit the country. Just because, Latinos wouldn't have a GDP of 4.0 if we weren't not super, super hard workers. I was seeing yesterday how somebody was making fun of ICE because they say that they come here, that Latinos come, that in general immigrants come here to take, because they're lazy and they're criminals. But the perfect place for them to find immigrants are the workplaces. So, I mean, it's just, or people that say, oh, they're taking my jobs and they're taking my resources. Okay, they can't take your jobs and your resources. They're lazy or they're not. Either exactly. It's like, it's just so incoherent. So I want you to tell me, from your point of view, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about immigrants and Latinos in general? Because at certain point, Nessa, most of this deportation movement is against Latinos. There is, in the last years, the biggest immigration has been Asian, but you barely ever hear any, propaganda or the woman in charge of Homeland Security, right? With her rifle here and, her very strange outfit. But anyway, whatever. You don't hear her saying that to Asians or to, people from Africa. You hear it mostly to Latinos and in Latino countries. By the way, she buys time on TV in Mexico and other countries to make that ridiculous ad of her with, the rifle. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about us Latinos?
I think there are many misconceptions, and if anything, they continue to exist for various reasons. I think there's a lack of empathy in this country, unfortunately, but there is also a lack of education, and a lot of the work that, LDC does is helping change the perception, of course, of Latinos in the United States. And a lot of immigrants are Latinos, and unfortunately, they think, like you said, that we are freeloaders, but it doesn't really make sense if at the same time ICE is coming to these construction sites and rounding up individuals. So how can we be both? You can't be both. And that's really unfortunate if we have, the research that shows us that we are hard workers. We're not necessarily freeloaders. Of anything, a lot of the people who say Latinos are freeloaders are actually a part of the demographic that makes up of the individuals asking for, government assistance, which, is completely fine in my opinion if you need help to get that help, but I think we do a lot of like finger pointing and then we hide like, like our hand behind us with the stone. Like we like to throw stones, but we forget that, it's not necessarily them. Sometimes it can be us. A lot of U.S. citizens like to say, oh, them, they are the ones committing crimes. But in reality, it's actually us U.S. citizens who research has shown we are committing crimes at higher rates than immigrants are, and they are less likely to commit crimes of anything. And it makes complete sense. Why would anybody come to this country and want to commit a crime if the point of wanting to be in this country is for a better life and you don't want to get, taken away. You don't want to be deported back to your country. So it just makes complete sense. And on the other hand, if you're a U.S. citizen like me, I know that if I do something, I might just get a slap on my wrist, go to jail, and I can get out, and I don't face deportation, if anything. And I think that these, like I said, these misconceptions are going to continue to exist until we are able to educate them or until they are able to get educated. And that's why the work they all do is so important to change that perception, switch the narrative, and make us a part of, mainstream.
Yeah. Thank you, because that's exactly why we do it. And you know what? It's just so ridiculous because, things like, for example, I don't know if you know this, but Latinos and Asians are the communities that have the least crime and are the communities that are the most employed. In the case of employment, Latinos are 8 percentage points more employed than Asians, who are the second most employed, which is incredible, right? So, and you and I know, all of us in our community know people that have 3 jobs, right? I mean, I know a lot of them, but also, in the case, for example, of, the mother of my husband, who had 9 kids, and both the father and the mother had 3 jobs to raise these kids. So when people dare to say that Latinos are lazy, I've been saying lately, it's the biggest gaslighting of this era.
It is, yes, for sure.
The perception of the perception that the traditional media promotes of us with this, criminal stories and, lack of representation, except when Latinos are either victims and are killed, or if they have some kind of income, they must be drug dealers because they are lazy and they don't, they are just in welfare. By the way, welfare is another place where the least people, like in percentage, the communities that collect the least are the Latino community and the Asian community. So that's extremely important because it really contradicts everything. It's like sometimes I feel that, it's like saying, hey, it's daytime, and somebody tells you, no, it's nighttime, because it's exactly that, like that contradictive, right?
Yes, so we are being gaslit for sure of anything. And it's very dangerous too to be, saying these misconceptions. We're feeding into it. Even when you see headlines nowadays, we see a lot of negative headlines that like portray, Latinos really bad, but those are the ones that get the most clicks. And unfortunately, sometimes they do help feed into that anti-immigrant rhetoric, and they do cost lives. I will say, there's a case really close to me where I'm from here in North Texas. In fact, right now it's been all over the news again. But there was this man from Mexico, an immigrant. He was a citizen right before he was killed, but his neighbor ended up killing him. His name's Aaron Martinez. His neighbor, Trevor McEwen.
I saw that in the news.
Yes, that happened near me. I actually went to the protest when this first happened, but basically, Aaron Martinez came to the United States, looking for a better life with his family, and he started from the bottom, and he ended up making a significant amount of money that he was able to buy a big ranch here in Northeast Texas. And unfortunately, when he moved in, his neighbors did not like it. There was a set of brothers that would come to his property all the time, and they would, you could say, bump heads. It is being alleged that Trevor McEwen would point, firearms at Aaron, and that he would come into his property all the time with the brother. And one day when Aaron was out on lunch, it was the day after his birthday as well, actually. Him and his wife share birthdays. Yeah, and I don't think some people realize when they repeat this or say this, that it actually can cost the lives of someone in the future. You know, a lot of politicians repeat this anti-immigrant rhetoric, and it has cost the lives. Like how we were saying, this man, Aaron Martinez, immigrated from Zacatecas to Northeast Texas, and he was able to buy a rancho, and his neighbor, you know, didn't really like the idea of having a Latino there. And it is being alleged, at least by the family, that Trevor McEwen would spew this anti-immigrant rhetoric saying, you don't belong here, you know, you must like work for the cartel, like, how do you have all this money? Y'all are too loud. And Aaron had a significant amount, you know, of land to do whatever he wanted, you know, if he wanted to throw parties, have music, and he had workers there. Unfortunately, one day, you know, when he came home from on a lunch break, his life was taken by his neighbor. And the case has been on the news again and again, because when it came to court, the, you know, suspect escaped, and he cut his ankle monitor and was on the run. He was just caught recently, found at his grandmother's house. But I think that case in itself just shows how far it can go when it comes to this anti-immigrant rhetoric. His daughter, in 2023, when he lost his life, his daughter was just a few months shy from her quinceañera, so she had to do her father and daughter dance without him. And I was invited to the quinceañera, and I just seeing that like firsthand was really awful.
Oh
It
my
was, for
God,
sure.
Nessa, you were close with them.
I would say just, you know, sharing their story, you know, made them connect with me, and then it made them just kind of just realize like I'm here for them, you know. So they did invite me, and they've reached out whenever he escaped. They reached out to me, and they're like, hey, could you help us, you know, spread the word? And I was able to, thankfully, and it didn't take too long till they found the man. But, you know, I that's one thing for sure about being a content creator, is knowing that like your voice has an impact, and you're able to help certain things happen at times.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, how amazing that you were able to support them in that way, and of course use your voice, but also use the
Yes.
quinceañera to be able to be there, because of course nothing replaced your dad, but having you there, I'm sure was just so, you know, amazing, like a gift for sure. And you know what, Nessa, this is the ignorance of people. Back to the gaslighting, and they have been gaslighted too. So you don't belong here. Do you know that, you know, a little bit more than 100 years ago, Texas was Mexico? I mean, if anything, you don't belong there. You belong in a continent that is completely different than this one, because Texas was Mexican. So what do you mean you don't belong here? I mean, when people say like, oh, you know, there are theories that right now in Washington, people are talking about, you know, a DNA test to become a citizen. And I'm like, oh, that'll be great, because that means that only the real people here would stay, and all these
Right.
other people from other continents will have to go, right? Because this is our country. The reason why it's Oregon and Colorado and Texas and Florida and California and Colorado and Montana, and that's because that was our country.
Yes.
And so we actually are the people that belong in those places. And so that's when it just doesn't make sense, right? But what the work that you're doing, Nessa, again, educating even our own people, right? I may be an immigrant because I was born in Mexico, but I gotta say, Texas was Mexico. So
Yes,
I
it
am
was.
still belonging here, even though I lived in another state and I grew up in another place of Mexico. This was Mexico. This was my land. So in a lot of different ways, we're not immigrants. We're actually we belong here.
We do.
And so I think it's important when the whole generation takes that in account and puts it in the DNA and act like it, they won't be able to bully us like that, because we belong here. This is our land. You came here, and let me see if I like you. Behave well, because that should be the dynamic, not the other way around.
Yes, for sure. That's something I've never been able to fully grasp or understand, is how is it that we were here initially, you know, and then eventually, because, you know, if you believers who believe in God, you know that when God created this earth, there was no such thing as an illegal or borders. We created that. We were here first, and somehow we're the outsiders now. But I really think that we are the outsiders now, and that a lot of these anti-immigrant policies have been created because the Latinos have yet to fully understand their power. The minute we understand our power, the minute we understand that if we go out to the polls, we can get and do whatever we want, we'll finally stop having these anti-immigrant policies. We'll finally stop being the other, and people will truly see our power for what we are.
Exactly. I believe sometimes that people have become some anti-Latino because they have realized our power before we have realized our power.
I think so too. Yes.
I mean, like,
yes, for sure.
they did it. And that's why they're so anti-Latino, because, we're the ones growing faster. All the numbers of the United States, I'm not actually giving numbers except from the United States official numbers. We're the ones growing faster. We're the youngest in this country. We're the ones achieving economic mobility much faster than any other race. Imagine most of the immigrants that arrive here don't have English. Some of them barely have Spanish, right? They don't have capital. They don't have savings. They don't have credit. They don't have a job. And so imagine that immigrant and 25 years later, where they are and who their kids are. Their kids are American. They are 100% English speakers. They also, most of them speak Spanish. They go to college because their parents came here to do the sacrifices enough so that they can send them to school. And so there's no bigger economic mobility than that. Even, for example, China may have a lot of mistakes, but the one thing they have is education. So even Chinese immigrants, they arrive here with education. They arrive here mostly with English, maybe some broken English, but with English. So to be a doctor and have a doctor's son is economic mobility, but not at the level of our economic mobility. The real American dream is Latino, nothing else. As you well said, we need to realize how important we are, how this is our land in so many ways, and how we belong here. Because I have the feeling that the haters have already realized it.
Yes, I think so too. It's a front, if anything. They know that, and they're able to do however they want with us. If they want to treat us horribly, they can, because at the end of the day, they're the ones getting voted into and they're representing us. But until we have more of our people stepping up, voting, running for office, will we finally see some good change for sure.
Exactly. And I wanted to ask you, some people tell me, one of the reports that we do is the media report. So for 8 years, we've been measuring how many roles do we have in English shows or English films. So we measure both shows and films. And we realized that we only have 3% of the leads. That means we're basically invisible. Even though we are 20% of the population and 25% of the young people, we only have 3%. Other communities have grown a lot in representation, and we're very happy for them, but our community hasn't. So sometimes when I speak about this, people say, well, I don't really care. That doesn't really affect me. But I do know that it affects us, all of us. And I tell them constantly that, the way, I'm going to give you examples, the way people treat you at the doctor's office, or the way the, acceptance officer in the university think of an application when there's a Latino name or when there's other kind of name, right? Or the way, they perceive that brown people like me, are, or are not, right? Or like all these ways in which really all these stereotypes affect us, even if we don't have anything to do with activism or with politics. And so do you get that? Do you think our people understand that, understand how much we are affected by stereotypes every day, all the time?
I think some people don't fully see that just yet, but like you said, it's very important for us to be represented like in films and movies, because if others are portraying us the way they want to, like you said, when it comes time for an admissions, officer to read an essay or something, they're gonna be thinking Latinos are this way just because growing up they saw we were a certain way in on TV, on the screen, and that's just really awful. It's dangerous. It doesn't get us anywhere, really. And I wish people paid attention more to the stereotypes that were being put out of us. And like you said, I recently made a video talking about how Latino creators should speak out. A lot of them feed into these stereotypes too, and they do it because they know it gets like views and clicks and makes them money. But I really think it's dangerous sometimes to feed into these stereotypes. It's better to, not feed into them because we're much more than that.
Exactly. And Nessa, there are so many things that we can celebrate from our culture, that why use the negative ones to make money? Use the good ones, right? Use
Yes,
the
for sure.
fabulous ways in which we relate to each other, our family values, our work ethic, our risk taking, nature, just by being immigrants, the way we love our parents, the way we, dedicate our lives to make their sacrifices worth it. There's so many beautiful things of our culture. There's no need to take the dark ones or the negative ones and then make money with them. You can make money by actually doing exactly the opposite.
Yes, you can.
So I was going to tell you, about 2 or 3 months ago, I got a call from an HR, human resources leader. And she told me that she wanted us to create some kind of report because in human resources, which is the part of the organization that hires people, the part of companies that hire and evaluate people, there were so many assumptions that were actually regulating hiring and regulating firing and regulating, promotions of people. And it's so interesting because she even mentioned that it is so strong that some groups have started to require that when you evaluate a job, you don't see the name, because people were assuming so much that if a Latino name, or an Asian name, all these ways in which subconsciously or unconsciously people assume who we are. So, Nessa, look, you've achieved so much, and you have so much more to achieve. First of all, what are your plans in the near future? And then second, what would be your goals in the medium term? And then third, a message or mission that you would like to encourage the audience with. So let's start with your plans in short term.
So my plans short term, I would say, is I would like to hopefully reach 1 million followers soon. I'm not that far from it. So that's why I'm saying it's a short term goal, because I feel like I could reach that, any day now, really, if I just work hard and keep being consistent. And also another short goal of mine would just be to get more opportunities when it comes to connecting with organizations. I feel like that's something I could do, here really soon, and when it comes to, goals, maybe farther out, one day I would like to create a scholarship, for students who are like me, first gen children of immigrants. And I would like to keep it open to also students who are undocumented, given what a lot of them are going through right now. I'm not sure if you saw that in Texas, Wednesday, June 4th, they said, we're not doing in-state tuition rates for undocumented students. And I think that's going to stop a lot of students from seeking a higher education. And it's so unfortunate that now they're going to have to work 2 to 3 times harder than they already were just to get that education if they want. Nobody was asking, for handouts. They're wanting to pay the in-state tuition if they need to. And I've met a lot of students who they didn't qualify for financial aid like I did, as a U.S. citizen. So they already had it harder. Now they've made it even harder for them. So that's why when I say that I want to do a scholarship, I want to keep them in mind, too. I don't want them to be like, oh, I can't apply to the scholarship. So that's something in the long term that I want to do, of course. And I know it'll involve, of course, a lot of steps, but I think it's possible. And I do see myself doing it for sure. I also want to open it up to young moms like me, because when I found out I was going to be a mom, like I said, I was a freshman in college. I was in my dorm room when I found out. Both, my partner and I were young parents. He ended up going to school as well at a community college at the same time that I was going to university. And had we not had that village that we have to this day, I don't think we would have both been able to go to school. I don't think he would have been able to start up that little business as fast as we did. I finished with my daughter being a year old, and me also having financial aid and a lot of scholarships helped me finish. And I had mentors and people that believed in me too, that were consistently telling me like what to do, what not to do. And if I am able to provide a scholarship for other young moms like me who think maybe it's out of reach for them, it would be amazing. It'd be something for sure that I would be so proud of.
That's amazing. Wow. Those are incredible goals. And I cannot even imagine where all this new connections and getting into an activist, with policy and, with some political leaders will take you, because it's been incredible your last 4 years and the 4 months. And I have a feeling that it'll continue, especially in such a climate right now, right? And as you well said, not only national, but in your state, Nessa, because I see the contrast. I live in California and I see the contrast here, right? Where, in-state tuition and sanctuary cities and all this different, way of appreciating immigration, which doesn't happen in Texas. And that's terrible. I think that in some ways, there should be mobility for families of undocumented towards the states where, they are welcomed. And that will show strongly, and it has already showed strongly in the economy. As you know, California is the largest state, not only physically, but also, well, actually economically. And it's the fourth largest economy in the world. And that's because 40% of people in California is Latino. And there are tons of immigrants, and people are not relating. Like Florida is going down economically because it's been expelling and, being unfriendly to all these immigrants. So yes, talking about the tuition, and the scholarships that you want to do for undocumented, recently I was invited to speak at Texas A&M, and there were funders. It was a huge event. It was probably like 1,000 people. And there was a funder that commented that he had scholarships at Texas A&M specifically for Latinos. And now they are not taking his money if he earmarks them for Latinos. The money should be given to the university, but they can't commit. And so, of course, he's taking his money somewhere else. So this is the tragedy of, discriminating, right? That nobody wins. So I love that you are, aware that those are the kind of students that need the money right now and that need the scholarships.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Other than, doing a scholarship for these individuals who need it the most, I would be open as well to helping cover renewal fees for DACA, because I do know it's gone up over the years, and it's like a subscription, they say, to be able to stay in America and work here and have protection from deportation, but yet it's no pathway to citizenship. So as long as DACA still exists, it's something also that I would like to do. I know the program, of course, it's dying, but it's still here. So people need the help. Some people, I know what it's like, to live in a household where they live paycheck to paycheck. And I know that it is hard for some people to come up with that renewal fee, because sometimes, it was hard for my parents to even make ends meet, but, they were able to, and sometimes they were able to because someone lended them a hand, like my grandmother, you could say. And I think that we should be like that to other immigrants as well here. If you're able to, lend out a hand if you can. And since I have that platform, I think that I'll be able to soon.
Yes, exactly. And to educate everybody as to what to ask when we vote. And, when our Congress people and our senators, support bills or not. So that's really education that needs to be done, that you're doing right now, which is so great. Okay, I could talk with you forever, but we need to close this because, there's a limit of a certain time. But to close this, Nessa, I would love to ask, so give us one piece of advice for young Latinos and Latinas that want to actually create a change, that want to be activists, that want to contribute to their community.
I know this sounds so cliche, and I know, Nike uses this phrase, but literally just do it. Just post the video, because if you keep second guessing yourself, it's not going to get you anywhere. Because had I second guessed myself, had I not posted these videos, in the long run, I wouldn't have met, former President Obama. I wouldn't be getting flown to DC or being given these, opportunities to meet with other powerful people making change. If you think about it too much and you don't do it, you're going to miss out on a lot. Stop questioning your intelligence. I used to do that all the time, but the truth is, if you're really passionate about it, eventually you'll learn what these big terms and phrases that are being used in politics mean, and stop, caring about what
Yep.
others may say, what your classmate or even maybe your parents may say, because once they start seeing what is coming from your hard work, they're gonna believe in you just like you believed in yourself. And, life was too short to not do what you love. Like I've told you in the past, my partner was diagnosed with cancer a little over a year ago. And what I've learned, if I've learned anything this instant, is that tomorrow surgery is not promised, that you tomorrow could start experiencing symptoms of a life-altering, disease. And do you want to be, at your deathbed of regretting what you could have done, the what if? You don't want to, so you should just do it, because seriously, tomorrow's not promised. It doesn't have to be a life-altering disease. It could be something else. And, people have car accidents every day, and people are expecting a tomorrow, but tomorrow isn't promised. So really just do what you love, what you are really passionate about.
I wanted to thank you because it's really been an honor. It's fantastic to work with you. Every time that I have the luck and the privilege to see you, to hear you talking, you've done amazing. I've been lucky to be in various forums with you. You're really spectacular. And please keep doing what you're doing, because we need you to succeed wildly every day. And we're here. We're here for you. We are rooting for you. We're your fans. And thank you for being with us this time.